What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Prayin and Slayin Podcast. My name is Aaron. I'm your host, and today we have another Operation Conservation series. And this is also a multi-guest episode, which is awesome. We've got Eric Dippold, Joshua Newsted, and Bryan Suchey, all from the North American Foundation, North American Pronghorn Foundation, sorry. And we're just excited to talk to these guys. And this one's extra special to me. Antelope, as a little kid, was always something I really wanted to get after, and I always had a dream to chase. It was always like the cool thing for me to watch on TV was antelope, but they captivated me for some reason. And actually, I made a goal for myself when we launched Light to Fire Outdoors that eventually I'd like to get to the point where I can just do life memberships for all these conservation organizations. And I'm proud to say that I am officially a founding life member of the North American Pronghorn Foundation. And that's a unique opportunity I had. I saw it online. I knew these guys launched the organization here this year, and saw the opportunity to be a founding life member, which is a really unique thing. And I was like, yep, that's me, got to do it. And so yeah, our first life membership for conservation to help us support more conservation organizations is with the North American Pronghorn Foundation. And with that, guys, let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to learn all about the North American Pronghorn Foundation, how it started. Hopefully hear some awesome antelope stories, maybe some tips, tricks, tactics, all that good stuff. But just hear all the good things that these guys started this organization for, to help out the North American Pronghorn. So let's jump into it with Eric Dippold, Josh Newsted, and Bryan Suchey. Antelope is my favorite thing to hunt, dude. So this is like the coolest podcast I'm recording right now. I'm pretty stoked about it.
Awesome. Yeah, should be fun. Don't make me come through the screen and choke you. It's pronghorn though, so no, I'm just
sorry. Okay.
No.
Hey, I've got to get it right.
Oh, good. It's funny. I was on the sheep fever podcast a while ago, and those guys were big I mean, everybody calls them what they call them, but they kept like, so antelope, and I'm like, man, like, okay.
Let's be correct here.
Yeah.
No, that's actually good. I was listening to the meat eater on going back and forth to the range today, and they were talking about all the African antelope species on the whatever that Steve apparently is over there doing a African hunt, I guess, and them referring to antelope, I guess it does kind of open up that term a little bit different. Pronghorn is totally something different.
It's actually a cool little aside. If you want to dive into like 5 minutes of bio, I can talk fairly intelligently about that. They're not an antelope. They're closely related, but they're not an antelope. They're nearest relatives a giraffe, if you can believe that.
And okapi. They're about equal with those.
Yeah.
That one.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have to get into that. That's that'll be educational for everybody, but including myself. That's great.
Yeah. Thanks for having us, Aaron.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, guys, welcome to the Prayin and Slayin Podcast. We're about basically everything conservation, veterans, and outdoors community. And like I told you guys already, this is about the most exciting podcast I think I'm getting a chance to record. Antelope, not antelope. We're going to find out why here in a little bit. Eric corrected me, so we're going to learn something today all together. Pronghorn are my favorite thing to hunt ever since I was a little kid. I was, everybody's dreaming of elk and moose and all these things. I grew up in Iowa, so it was turkeys and deer, but you're always picking that Western big game animal to get you excited. And for whatever reason, pronghorn got me excited. I was what I always wanted to grow up and do, and had my chance when we were stationed out west to go chase them. And now there's officially a North American Pronghorn Foundation, and just the way it turned out, about the time I found out about you guys, I hopped on the website. I'm like, I've got to be a member. I want to support what these guys are doing. My favorite big game animal in North America. And you guys had the opportunity to have like a founding life membership, and I'd never seen that before. And one of my goals when I started Light to Fire Outdoors as a business was, hey, once a year, we're going to pick one organization and try to become a life member if we've got the ability to do it with our 10% conservation fund. And a founding life membership for what you guys are doing. I was like, that's so cool that just worked out that way. So I've got the plaque hanging on my wall. It just showed up. Got the mug here. So
there you go.
Officially a founding life member, and I get to have you guys on the podcast. This is exciting for me personally, but now, man, I'm excited for what you guys are doing at the end of the day to support the antelope and everything else that is involved in where they live and everything else. I'm sure it's a bigger picture support mechanism for hunting in the West and animals in the West and habitat in the West, just as a broad spectrum thing. So I'm really excited to learn more about what you guys are doing with that.
Yeah, perfect. Glad to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, man. And just so we've got 3 guests. This is different too. We've usually just got one guest that got introduced, but so the voice you just heard is Eric Dippold, and we've got Josh. He's sorry, got to scroll up on the last names here.
Oh, no problem.
We've got Josh Newsted from he's from Montana, so he's back there where I wish I was. Then we got Bryan Suchey. Suchey, am I saying that right?
Suchey, but honestly, half my
Suchey?
family goes by Suchey, so it's like, yeah, it doesn't really matter which way.
Perfect, man. Well, we got all three of you guys on, and I'm excited to learn a little bit about you guys. So I'll let you guys kind of take it over from here and just introduce yourselves. Tell us who you are, a little bit of a background about, I guess, what got you into hunting, and then what brought you maybe to the, pronghorn in particular, and then what led you to the North American Pronghorn Foundation. I guess each of you individually.
Sure. Yeah. Real quick. I grew up in the Northeast, so I was a Northwest Pennsylvania guy. That's the joke is that you got Pittsburgh in the West and Philly in the East and Alabama in between. And I grew up in the Alabama part of Pennsylvania. I grew up right on the back door of the Allegheny National Forest, which is one of the biggest national forests east of the Mississippi. And so I sort of came to the outdoors and hunting that way. My dad hunted, my grandfather hunted, and it just was the thing that we did in the fall. I think like anybody who grew up in the East, didn't really see my first pronghorn until I think 2000. First pronghorn hunt in the early 2010s, so 2010, 2011 timeframe. Just was absolutely captivated with them, driving across Wyoming, drew my first tag in Northeast Wyoming. And just absolutely fell in love with them. So from a pronghorn perspective, that was sort of the beginning of the end for me. And then in terms of how I've been able to move all over the place, I'm a military guy too. So 27 years this year. They've given me the opportunity to move around and see a lot of different things and really fall in love with the West. And I think you're probably going to, much like I think everybody in the podcast, you're going to have to drag me out of here kicking and screaming. But as far as the NAF specifically, me and a buddy had sort of had an idea that, man, it's weird that there's no pronghorn foundation on the landscape. That's bizarre. You got Rocky Mountain elk and so on and so forth. And it'd been a kind of back of the napkin, if we ever get time to get it going, we'll get it going. And I called a conservation mentor of mine in 2024. And I was like, hey, I really want to get this thing going. And he's like, oh, are you working with Brock Wall in North Dakota? And I'm like, who's Brock Wall? And long story short, he put me in contact with Brock, and Brock was about 6 months ahead of where I thought I might be and had it on the rails and going. So I gave him a call, and the rest is history for me.
That's cool, man. Well, before we jump in here quick, first of all, thank you for your service, dude. That's awesome. What branch?
I'm Navy, 27-year Navy guy. So
yeah. That's amazing, dude. Well, congrats on 27 years. You don't look a day over, I'd say 25, man. So that's pretty impressive.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible, dude. Well, thank you for your service. That's super cool. And we'll probably have to have you on another episode. So another series that we do in the Prayin and Slayin is Operation Hunt. That's where we bring vets on to tell hunting stories, tell a little bit about your service and whatever. I was wondering with the sand t-shirt, I was actually going to ask. I saw that in there.
That's a pronghorn. That's a pronghorn shirt though. That's ours. It's one of ours. So yeah. Hey. Yeah, no, I appreciate the thanks, and it's been great. It's shown me a lot of cool things. So
very cool. And then I was a little curious with the mustache. You got it in regs, and I was like, I'm just curious. Yeah. I haven't shaved my face all the way down to the skin since I got out. I did 6 years Air Force, and then every year though, one of my I guess quirks is in the Prayin and Slayin logo is a mustache. I grow a huge handlebar mustache. I did it as a get out of the military. I got out in like a mustache march, so it was all in regs, but super thick, and I just kind of let it grow. And I got to the point where I could like curl it over my eyebrows before I cut it the first time. And so now every single year I grow it out starting hunting season, and as soon as hopefully I get something. We travel all over, so it's kind of a hit or miss depending on hunting where we're hunting. But once I kill a buck or whatever, I'll shave the mustache. That's the goal anyway. So
good stuff.
Proud of the stash, man. Looks good.
Well, there we go. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, cool. Brian or Josh, who's next?
Take us away, Josh.
Sure. I'm originally from northern Michigan, and my dad was more of a fisherman than a hunter, so he would take us fishing all the time, and his brother liked to duck hunt. So I first got into hunting as like a teenager, and I instantly fell in love with duck hunting. But in Michigan, the way people typically deer hunt is just kind of sit in the woods and hope it comes by, and that never really appealed to me, and no one in my family, apart from one uncle, really did it. But I'm a physician and anesthesiologist, and when I was starting my residency, my best friend from high school moved to Montana. So every year I would take at least 1 or 2 weeks of vacation to come visit him. And immediately I fell in love with Montana and the more open style hunting. If you told me I have to sit for 2 hours still in a blind or I have to walk 10 miles, I would easily choose 10 miles. I'm too hyper to be sitting still like that. So the last 2 years, right before I graduated, I drew doe tags for antelope. It made sense for me because as a resident, I was on a pretty tight budget compared to like a bull elk tag as a non-resident in Montana, which is about $1,000. That was much more economical. And then when I moved out here, I finally got my first buck. By coincidence, the first year I moved out here, and that sold it for me. So I was fortunate to be able to kind of pick where I live because of my specialty. There was medical need in Montana, so that worked out fantastic. And antelope was the first big game I'd ever hunted, and I instantly loved that style. And kind of like the other guys have mentioned, I've always been a part of conservation. Like, I'm a member of Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and over the last year or two, I had like searched the internet to try to join an antelope foundation because they didn't seem to have representation, but there really wasn't one. So I figured the best I could do in the meantime, which is also a very good cause, was to be the part of the Mule Deer Foundation to help preserve the prairie. And then I saw on the internet on a hunting forum, Hunt Talk, someone posted that they wanted to start an antelope foundation, and I was right away that, yeah, that's it for me. And so I was fortunate enough to also meet Brock and the rest of these cool guys and take it from there. And yeah, I've hunted all the big game in Montana, but antelope holds a special place for me just because it was my first. They're such a unique animal. And like I mentioned, as not a very patient person, sometimes it's easy when you hunt a couple of days and you don't see a single thing to let your spirits fall. That's extremely rare in antelope. You're almost always seeing them. They may be on private land. So that, and it seems also like a hunt that a person can do deep in life, like mountain goat or sheep. It's easier when you're in your prime and physically, but as I age and become an old man, antelope seems like something you can do as big game almost to the very end. And in addition, just how unique they are, how deer, elk, and moose are all related, but antelope is in a league of its own. So there's so many factors that made this like a slam dunk do it for me. So I feel very blessed to live in Montana or live in a Western state, and also be able to help antelope.
Heck yeah, man. That's so cool. And that, yeah, it sounds like a little bit of our stories overlap too. When we got to Montana, can't drive anywhere in Montana and hardly see an antelope, but that was one of the coolest things I liked when I finally got my chance to hunt them. It happened to be actually my first hunt technically was in Wyoming, but either way, Wyoming, Montana there, you get to see them, you screw up a stock, they run over the next ridge, you try again, or you bump into another herd. It's just like, it's such a cool thing. And like you said, you get to walk and hunt. This Iowa boy growing up, and then our first duty stations were on the East Coast, sitting in a tree stand versus something out west where you just get to sling your rifle over your shoulder and go walk. Like, it's just a whole different ballgame. That's really cool, man. Well, Bryan, you're up to bat now, man. You're the number 3. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up in Colorado, introduced to hunting and fishing at a really young age with my father, my grandfather, the normal story there. My father was more of a goose hunter, but he messed around in all spaces and everything. And I think by the time I was 4 or 5, I was that obsessed kid for big game, any big game. I'll say it was certainly not limited to pronghorn. I think probably the species that was my favorite for the longest was moose, and whether or not that was stuffed animals or even embarrassing things like when we'd be out on a fishing trip, I would pocket all of the moose droppings that I could find. All of those type of things, it followed me along through childhood. Really wanted to start big game hunting in Colorado. You have to be 12 to be able to big game hunt. I mean, even when I got my hunter safety quite a bit younger than that. And I remember that one of my big motivators for learning to read was so that I could take my hunter safety course. And so, it was coming from a young age there, but it really cemented in my teenage years. That's when I first started pronghorn hunting. I ended up following that passion in my undergrad degree, studying ecology, fish and wildlife management at Montana State University. I did other stuff for my graduate degree, but then I'm currently in environmental and statistical consulting for my career. So, the passion for wildlife and wildlife conservation has been, probably pretty fundamental to my pathway as a human. And pronghorn were one that was, so uniquely different than all of the other species. I remember seeing them as a kid, and you see an elk and it runs away. Maybe moose don't care about you or whatever you want to say that they'll do. But I just remember, at a young age, I don't know, it was probably 6 or 7. There was a day where my dad was like, "Hey, take off your t-shirt and flag that pronghorn over there." I'm like, "What?" And I was like, "You're wearing a white t-shirt, just try it." And it was a small herd, and they were a few hundred yards away. And shortly after, I had kind of spun my T-shirt around like the little kid that I was. I just remember cutting that distance in half, and then all of a sudden they were right on top of us. And so just like that curiosity of pronghorn is just like they're such such a cool species of big game, and we're so fortunate to have them here in North America. And so they've always been on the back of my mind as a species that I'm particularly caring for. And then I particularly remember that winter of 2022, 2023. I'm in Southeast Idaho right now, and my company's headquarters are in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and we have an office in Laramie, Wyoming as well. So I tend to cross Wyoming fairly regularly. And not only was that winter just insanely difficult to watch, but every time I drive through, what I would consider the heart of pronghorn country, ever since then, it's a totally different landscape without seeing an obnoxious number of pronghorn all the time. And so that was kind of like my moment where I was like, okay, like this needs to be a priority in my life. And then shortly after that, just like Josh, and I ran into it on Hunt Talk. I was like, this is the opportunity, to make a difference and have an impact for the next generations. And so it was great timing, and I think all of us recognize that it was great timing in the sense that it's happened, but it should have happened a decade ago. And but glad to be a part of it. And once again, Aaron, thank you so much for having us on the podcast. I really appreciate it, both your membership support, but then also letting us on your platform as we're working on membership development and getting our mission and values out there.
Yeah, man, absolutely. That's so cool, and I think appreciate it. And the cool thing too, like having all three of you guys on, is I remember taking my brother on his first big game hunt, and I told him, I was like, hey, dude, he's kind of like into hunting like I am. He's more into like the long range shooting thing. And so, I mean, if you're going to be a long range shooter, like there's a good chance pronghorn is a good thing to chase. You have a lot of opportunity, hopefully at some distance, and we'll play that game, right? So I told him to put in for Wyoming with me, and he's like, I don't know if I got the time off, man, and I don't know if I got the budget for that. I'm like, oh, we probably won't draw anyway. Don't worry about it, man. We'll put in this year and maybe draw next year. Well, sure enough, we drew. So I got a buck tag and 2 doe tags for Wyoming, and he got a buck tag, and he came up to Wyoming with me. And I just remember that was the first time I hunted in Wyoming. I didn't really, it was a little bit harder to draw a unit. I put in with another group of guys who'd been putting in for a while, and it was more limited on terms of the numbers of hunters we saw. But then this unit was like an easier to draw unit. And I couldn't believe, I think honestly, we're up to like 15 or 16 different states that the license plates were all from. And just seeing that like people from all over the country were like congregated right there in that unit in Wyoming, just car after car after car. And like, there wasn't a single license plate, I don't think, that we saw multiple times except for the locals driving around. It was kind of crazy. But you guys being from all these different places and then having that common passion for not antelope, pronghorn, is just such a cool thing.
There's no police, man. It's all right.
No, I'm trying to police myself now. So I want to. I'm glad you corrected it, because now it'll always be in my head.
Plus, officially calls them antelope, so you always think that.
Well, that's true. That's where I cut my teeth on them. So, but no, it is cool seeing you guys from all different walks of life, all different places, and commonly, like, collectively coming together and saying, hey, like, let's do something to protect this very unique species and the place that they live. And I think that's so cool. I think this is probably a good place. Pronghorn, Eric, go ahead and dive deep. You got more than 5 minutes if it takes you more than 5 minutes, man. But tell us all about why pronghorn, not antelope, because I'd venture to bet 90% of the people I know call them antelope of some sort.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like everybody's got their colloquial name for them, right? Antelope, speed goats, whatever it is, right? I think we're going to talk a lot about why pronghorn haven't gotten the attention that a lot of species have from a conservation perspective. And I think part of what is unique about them is that we don't really understand as much as we think we do about them. So they are not an antelope, despite the what we typically call them. They're the last member of their family, Antilocapra americana. So their nearest living relative is the giraffe or okapi in Africa. So they're actually most closely related to a giraffe, which is crazy. We tend to think of them as they're either an antelope or they must be related to deer somehow. But that's sort of their background. In the Pleistocene in North America, there were I think 13 or 14 in the teens number of species of close relatives of the pronghorn we know now. Some had crazy horns that, went forward. Some had 3-foot horns. I mean, they're just all sorts of different, you could tell that they were trying out what was going to work best, and what we ended up with is truly a relic of the Pleistocene. I mean, they cut their teeth and really evolved on the landscape. And, as they matured on that landscape, they were chased by American cheetahs, American lions, short-faced bears. That's the environment that they really grew up in. And it's part of why they are what they are now. They're the second fastest land animal on the planet, second only to the cheetah, the African cheetah. Sustained speeds in the 50s are no problem for them. Peak speeds in the mid 60s are definitely a thing they can do. There's a lot of unique physiology that goes along with that. They have, one of the things that people notice fairly early, the first time you put your hands on it, and Aaron, you've probably figured this out too, like their fur or their hair is not really hair. It's sort of these tubular loose hairs that are really individually pretty high in insulation. They're hollow to provide a whole lot of insulation to that critter. They have pretty incredible joints. So the first time you take it's a hunting podcast and we're a hunting organization, so we'll talk about taking one apart. But the first time you take those legs off, take the knees apart, you think you're gonna need a hacksaw to make it happen. There are some tricks, but like compared to pulling a deer apart, it's a whole different critter. And then the last thing, and this is one of my favorites, if you get into the neck, their trachea, their windpipe is about the same diameter as a horse's. And the fuel for the fire, right? It's the fuel that keeps those things going 55 miles an hour for, who knows how long. And they've got a really unique musculature in their neck that helps them literally force air down that trachea. So there's muscles that can contract their trachea and force air into their lungs. So they're a very unique critter. There's nothing like them anywhere else on the planet. Like I said, I think they're their last surviving member of their family. So, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, the whole biology thing from high school. You got to go a few rungs up that ladder before you find a comparable relative. And they're a truly North American critter. They don't exist anywhere else on the planet, and they never will. So it's a pretty unique thing to get behind. And I think it's important to talk a little bit about that biology as we start to talk about why we exist and why pronghorn and why now.
Super cool, dude. And I had no idea about 90% of what you just said. So that's awesome. I'm world-class educated now, I feel like.
I don't know about that, but I'm a talented amateur. So
yeah, that was a crash course for sure. But no, that's actually mind-blowing. And one of the things you notice, and like looking at them through glass or anything, or any of the videos I've got of them, is they are constantly it looks like they're breathing hard all the time, but they're just, their chest is constantly pumping. But to your point, like they can snap your fingers and they can take off and be over that next ridge before you can even think about what they're doing. And cut distance like you wouldn't believe if they're coming to you. The wave your t-shirt story. I've watched that a few times and it's pretty mind-blowing. But that's nuts. And I mean, I think it makes me appreciate them that much more. Even I thought they were the coolest thing already. And then knowing that it's truly just 100% unique to North America, that's really cool. But the fact that it's kind of the last of its kind is even cooler, and that it's not truly an antelope is very interesting, because everybody's either pronghorn antelope, it always follows it with an antelope, right? Or that you hear North American antelope or whatever the case is. So that's pretty cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Just for fun, a couple more interesting things about them. Not only is the trachea really interesting, but the lungs themselves, they're the most efficient lungs in the world. I think sled dogs now compete with them for their VO2 efficiency. But their lungs are just insane. If you're cutting one up, you should also take the moment to just check out the size of the lungs and the amount of their chest that they take. Also, I don't think Eric noted it, but in case people aren't aware, they're also the only horned animal to drop their horns annually. So everybody thinks, bighorn sheep, your African antelope species, those grow throughout their life. And pronghorn are particularly unique because they're the only horned animal that if someone wanted to, they could shed hunt for. Of course, the horns don't persist on the landscape for an incredibly long length of time because they're not made out of bone. But just another thing that just an incredibly unique trait that they have that is, not expressed anywhere else in extant species.
Yeah, I'll tell you too, if you're ever out there and if you're lucky enough to find a shed, take a close look, because another little known fact that pairs with that, they're actually hair. right? It's grown together hair. And then when they shed them, you can look at the bottom and you'll see how it literally is hairs that have just sort of woven together and bonded. They're just a cool critter. I could go on and on, but yeah, it's good stuff. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in too on the nerd out session, because I'm in agreement with all you guys on that, in that how Mother Nature gave them this divinely inspired like engine, not the heart and lungs. And I remember reading about that famous horse Secretariat, and when he died and they examined him, you can have an enlarged heart in a bad way, but Secretariat's was symmetrical, powerful, well built. The antelope's is the same. And in my line of work in medicine, not to be morbid, but I see, during surgeries, and it's always awe-inspiring how like an adult human weighs 180, 200 pounds, and our heart and lungs are so small compared to an antelope that these things were blessed with a power source that can put everything else to shame. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that was the first thing I think I'd actually eaten a heart out of. Just getting into Montana, getting all these different big game animals. Freezer was always full, so I was finally at the point where it's like, okay, I'm gonna start. I watch all these shows that do the organ meat, the liver, the heart, this and that. And the antelope heart was, I think, the first heart that I ate. I didn't even notice the size. I guess I'm gonna have to pay attention next time I get an opportunity to go hunt for one of those. But liver was like the first thing out of actually my wife's and my double was we took the livers out of them, and I guess liver's a good thing for pregnant women. So we were chopping that up, putting it in the chili and all this stuff. I was like, this is a good excuse to do it. So
yeah.
Oh, that's super cool, man. And actually, the shed you talked about, we went to one of her good friends' weddings in Wyoming, and there happened to be or BLM ground. Sorry, anyway, just shy of where this wedding venue was, and I had half a day to kill. She was in the wedding party. I was like, I'm not going to go drag around with them all day. I'll just go walk around this other area and check it out. And I actually ran across one. I was like, that was about the coolest thing I never expected to find. And I threw it in the car and I forgot about it. And it ended up underneath the seat. And like you said, it's hair. And I didn't know that. I thought it was just this piece of bone, but it kind of looked like almost like frayed wood. Yep. But by the time I found it, and I had it up in there, and I got in the car one day, and it smelled like someone threw a dead fish in the car. I was like, oh my God, like what is that? Yeah. I couldn't figure it out, and I finally got up on the seat, and it was like still rotting, I guess, or whatever. Like you said, they don't hang out very long in the landscape when you find them. So if they do, you might want to preserve them a little bit. I definitely didn't do that. So, well, let's get into the North American Pronghorn Foundation. That's established. It is Pronghorn. It's not American Antelope Foundation. It's the North American Pronghorn Foundation. And obviously it started because there really wasn't anything doing it. You guys all recognize that. I've recognized it. I just, one of those things, I didn't realize there was guys out there looking to put one together. What brought everybody together to say, let's do this? And then what was it really kind of founded on? What are its pillars and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I think the idea had been kind of kicking around in a couple, I mentioned in the intro that like I had this on a bar napkin, and I think a couple people had noted that there was no nationwide pronghorn org. Due respect, got to give some shout outs. So Arizona Antelope Foundation is a state pronghorn conservation foundation in Arizona, and I believe South Dakota. Somebody back me up here. I think South Dakota also has a state pronghorn foundation, but a couple of us had noted that it wasn't out there, and I think Brock was the first one to the wall and put some stuff out on Hunt Talk and got the whole thing going together. Bottom line, we're looking to establish the premier continent-wide pronghorn conservation foundation, and our mission is to enhance pronghorn populations and habitats through advocacy, stewardship, stakeholder partnerships, and our hunting heritage. We're proud to be a hook and bullet org. We are hunters and are not afraid to say so. The North American model is a key part of our hunting heritage and our way of looking at pronghorn conservation. But yeah, that's pretty much who we are, and sort of where the idea came from. And I'll turn it over to the guys here.
Yeah, I think Eric nailed it. One little anecdote that I would just add to that, talking about the time being now. I think one of the initial motivating efforts was around some of the data in Nevada and what the pronghorn populations are looking like. And that sparked a conversation on Hunt Talk. Give some credit to David, one of our other board members, for initiating that conversation and really just starting to show the time is yesterday. So this needs to happen. But I think, since we've gone public with this organization, the number of times I've had a very similar conversation with folks that it goes something like, oh my gosh, I didn't hear about this organization yet. It's like, well, we're in our infancy, we're growing right now. They're like, yeah, and I don't think about pronghorn all that much, but gosh, I really love hunting them. Like they might be my favorite thing to hunt, but like we talked about elk hunting, deer hunting, all those other things, and dreams of sheep hunting and all that. But then like they come back to it, like, gosh, I love pronghorn hunting. And then that next thought is, but man, I haven't gotten as many tags. And it's just like you could just put that conversation on repeat. And so it's just, it's one of those ones where, we're hoping to help connect right now that that not only is the time today to be working to promote pronghorn conservation, but at the end of the day, we want to have pronghorn on the landscape to be able to hunt. And and so it's been a journey going through that with interested parties. For sure.
No, definitely. No time like today, right? Only better day than today is yesterday, and it wasn't there. So, yeah, great opportunity to put something together, man. And it's definitely a big thing. And if you're listening and you're not a part of it yet, go join. They got membership levels and help support this thing. It is just kicking off, which is super unique. And I don't know if there's been another one that's been started other than like, state level organizations that have split off from national ones or whatever during my lifetime that I've seen. I've worked close to a little over a decade, I guess now, in just the outdoors hunting space. And part of what I've got the unique opportunity to do, I was a park ranger civilian side after I got out of the military and then jumped over here. And so conservation programs have always been a really cool part about how kind of I bridge my passion project was being a park ranger into my outdoors career, I guess. And but yeah, this is like the first national organization I think to launch in that 10 years that I've been had eyeballs on it most of the time, which is really neat to see too. So definitely a unique time and a great animal and a great landscape to support for sure. You mentioned it already, I think, or a couple of you guys did. You mentioned like the idea that pronghorn have not had the opportunity or had the eyeballs on them, maybe like some other species do. And is there a reason behind that, do you think? Because so many people hunt them and from all over the place, like the whole country's looking at them. Why haven't they gotten the attention that like whitetails or turkeys or elk and mule deer have?
Sometimes I think it's also just because they're so conspicuous on the landscape. Like, all of our stories talk about the ease of seeing them. You drive through the Western US once and like you see them on the side of the road. And you can see so many of them, especially historically driving through a place like Montana or Wyoming, where just like, I think we take them a lot for granted, very, very frequently, where it's, if you see them, they can't be having that many problems because I just passed, one every 3 minutes on I-80 as I crossed the great state of Wyoming. And so because of that, I think it just kind of, it pushes us to, think about maybe in our the forward part of our minds is thinking about the ones that they're hard to find. It's the elk. You're probably not going to run into that many just on a road trip. There's certainly exceptions to that, but just there's so many opportunities to interact with pronghorn that people kind of take them for granted.
I think also too, their landscape isn't as maybe classically or stereotypically beautiful as what people think. So like a sheep or a mountain goat is on a mountaintop and that lends. So when you're supporting that kind of an animal, you, in your mind's eye, maybe subconsciously, you think of the natural beauty. A lot of people may think of where antelope live as kind of just desolate, being on the open prairie. So it's not as classically beautiful, but in reality, we all know, and hopefully a lot of your listeners will get to experience it. The prairie can be exceedingly beautiful in its own way and open to so many animals. Like when you think of Africa, you think of the Serengeti, which is like the Great Plains of Africa. So even though the prairie may not look like much at first glance, there's a lot more hidden beauty to it. But I think it doesn't have that kind of sexy allure when you're trying to advocate for a species because of where it lives. But that's not really a reality-based thing once you just delve a little bit deeper. It's really an awesome landscape and awesome terrain.
Yeah, a couple things there that I'd add to. Like, I think one of the things that are always a struggle is that 2/3 of the country, really, somewhere between half and 2/3 of the country has never had them. Pronghorn are a Western critter. They've lived west of the Mississippi pretty much their entire existence. Longer than west of the Mississippi was west of the Mississippi, if you want to look at it that way, right? That river moved around over time, So as a kid growing up in PA, I'd never heard of a pronghorn. I had no concept that such a thing existed, but we had an elk herd in central PA, right? So that's part of the problem that we're facing. And then, we've talked about the biology, but we don't know a lot about them. Science knows a lot about them, but the average hunter, it's like, I don't know, it's an antelope, and I don't say that in a bad way. I've called them antelope. I call them speed goats, whatever. But there's a knowledge gap there. And the thing that you grow up with and the thing that you chase around a lot, everybody knows a lot about whitetail because they're everywhere, so what you fall in love with what you see. And if you don't necessarily see them, if you haven't been through Wyoming or Montana or, parts of Idaho or, Colorado, like maybe you've never seen one, and it's going to be hard to be real passionate about conserving something that you've never seen. One other thing I'll pick up Josh's point. It's a great point about the landscape. The two things I would mention in addition to his point on what an incredible landscape it is next to the ocean. It's the highest biodiversity, and please back me up if I'm screwing this up, but it's got the highest biodiversity of any landscape in North America, aside from the ocean. And the other thing that's really important to remember is that prairie sage interface is the most threatened landscape on the planet right now. We're losing over 2 million acres a year. And it is absolutely under threat. So it's a key part of why habitat is in our mission. It's important to talk about that habitat as well as the critter.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought
100%.
Eric, that the habitat is so closely linked with pronghorn. And as Josh was pointing out, that since it's not maybe quite as sexy and all of that we kind of take it for granted. I find it, I just have to point out that it seems really funny in our answers that between Eric and I, you got one of us saying they're too easy to see and one of us saying that people don't see them enough. But it is kind of one of those two extremes. Like there's either no pronghorn where you are, or you can see them all over the landscape. And so it kind of a funny dichotomy there. But I think both still ring very true.
Across the board, those are some great things. And I had never thought of it that way, but 100% you're right. They do live in such a unique subsection of the country that if you don't live there, like you're not, unless you're driving across, like you said, I-80, across Nebraska, you start seeing them. I grew up in Iowa. There's no antelope or no pronghorn there, and then you hit Nebraska and then you start seeing them dotted a little bit more. Then the closer west you get to Colorado, that's where you start seeing like the herds and stuff over, just that wide open landscape. And then, to Josh's point, when you're driving across that, I look at it, you're a kid growing up, you can't see more than, depending on what part of Iowa you grow up in or whatever, you're either looking at trees or you're looking at cornfields. But then you get out there and you hit the west, and all of a sudden you can see for ever. Like I get, Montana is called Big Sky Country, and I think it's because you can actually see across the landscape like you wouldn't believe, and it's got a whole different beauty to it. To your point, but then a big part of again growing up in Iowa and some of the stuff I went to school for on the conservation front, you talk about the biodiversity, with the ocean, that prairie landscape. Iowa looks at it a little different. We're not, it's not so much the big game that's there, but like the bird species and different things that used to be in Iowa that aren't there anymore because it's all been replaced by monoculture fields and things like that. But yeah, you look at an actual prairie landscape, and it's just kind of mind blowing, the amount of grasses and forbs and animals and insects and the soil structure, like all the stuff that's actually comprises to make a true prairie landscape. And then, like you said, you get out west and it's more sage prairie and different things like that. It's kind of a mind blowing experience once you just understand it a little bit. Which is really, really cool. So yeah, and I never thought that much about, like, to your point, like some animals just live in a very mind blowing or mystical, whatever you want to tag that as, the top of a mountain. No one climbs to the top of a mountain, looks around and goes, oh, this sucks. But then you get a mountain goat that lives up there, a bighorn sheep or something, right? And it's just like, oh, now he's the coolest thing, because how could he live clear up here at 15,000 feet, and then an antelope lives at ground level and it's flat and they can take off and run. So it's, yeah, very interesting thing. Like you either see too many of them, or you don't see enough of them, or the landscape they live in may or may not be like ultra attractive. It's just interesting. I never thought of it that way.
One other thing, I spent
cool.
2 years in Nebraska and got used to prairie a little bit, and got to really stretch my legs on it. And then, my first couple pronghorn hunts, I think the thing that'll surprise you about that landscape, you might be zooming across I-80 and you look across it and you're like, man, this is wide open. I can see forever. I can see this whole country. But then you put your boots on it, right? And you find all those little folds and all those little channels and draws and pieces of cover where they can hide. And you really find out that, there's more going on there than meets the eye. And, I think not only from a biodiversity point of view, but just from a topography point of view, there's a lot of country there you can't see.
It'd be a challenge to hunt them when you lose them. You go, wait, I didn't think there was any topography there.
Yeah.
It can be a challenge to hunt them too, because it's so flat. It appears like, how can I sneak up? You have to do belly crawls and get pretty creative. And then probably everyone, I know I've had issues. A rangefinder can't barely work because it needs like a reflective surface. So yeah, you can shoot 500 yards, but do you know if it's 500 yards or 4 or 6? So there's a kind of a cleverness and an interest to that kind of a hunt. It's not as easy as you'd first think.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I remember when you first get out west too, and you take a look at something, it's like the first time you look at it, you're like, oh, that's got to be 200, 300 yards away. And, you get a rangefinder on it and it's, way closer than you thought, or you think something's way closer and you range it and it's like, holy crap, that's 1,000 yards off. Getting used to that. And then you talk antelope in particular, they're such a different critter because they're just small. You're thinking something in your brain is like, oh, that's the size of a deer.
Yep.
And then you get your, an antelope at 100 yards looks like a deer at 200 or 300 yards. Like it's just they're a totally different sized game. And so you talk that into their landscape as well. And, it's a whole different thing, not to mention the sage grows at different levels too. So trying to get a range on one to actually figure out how far they are, that can even be a game in itself.
Yeah, no, I know we're going to talk about hunting tips and that kind of stuff later, but I mean, we just hit on tip number 1: bring a damn rangefinder, because I'll tell you what, if your frame of reference is not that landscape and that critter, you are going to be wildly inaccurate. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. Well, and as far as one more thing on the North American Pronghorn Foundation. So you guys mentioned habitat and obviously the animals themselves and habitat, one of your core missions. So do you guys, short-term and long-term, are you guys thinking this is more of a habitat? You mentioned the 2 million acres a year getting lost of that merge section between sage and open prairie, that being a big piece of this puzzle. Is your guys' mission going to be more like on the habitat front, like some of the other national level organizations, or some of them are just more about like the science and getting more science around their animal, like Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, for example? Is more about science and education around the species and the animal more than it is around the habitat, or vice versa. What's your guys' kind of vision on that?
I would just start by saying, I think the cop out answer is it's both, but it's true. It is both. You can't have the critter without the habitat, I think is probably the way I look at it. Fundamentally though, sure, we've got to work hard to conserve the critter. That means a lot of things. It means, talking about science, talking about, things that we don't understand with pronghorn, which are many, because it's not a cervid, right? It's its own little thing. And so maybe what we know from mule deer doesn't apply to pronghorn, so there's definitely some science we got to do there. There's definitely some critter conservation we've got to do there. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but fencing is a big deal for pronghorn. They are not prone to jump. Can they do it? Sure. One of our board members, Dean Krebs, has got a fantastic story about taking his daughter pronghorn hunting. And, he's talking about how they don't jump and they'll never jump a fence. And the first buck they see jumps a fence right in front of his daughter. She looks at him like he's, born yesterday, but they don't like to jump. It's unusual, right? So fencing is a bigger issue for them than it can be for other critters. But the core of the reality is that they exist on a specific landscape. They generally like to be close to sage. They're not an obligate. They don't have to have sage per se, but they like to be around it, and they like that dry, high, short grass into sage landscape. And if we lose that, the critter's gone, right? So I don't think of it as it isn't one or the other, but it's sort of like a nesting circle. Like you got to take care of the critter, sure, but the critter only exists on the habitat. And so of course we have to take care of the habitat.
Yeah, 100%, man. No, I totally agree. And I know the thing's kind of passed now. Luckily, we did good as far as people calling in and getting the that massive land sale that was proposed wiped off of the voting bracket in DC there. So that's behind us now. It was going to be a little bit more of a hot topic, I guess, when we were originally going to schedule this, but in terms of that public land sale, like just talk about, number one, your guys' position on it. If there was anything you guys actively did to push anything there on like a policy level or whatever, and what your objectives will be in the future in that landscape. And then also like, what would that have meant, that giant amount of land that we would have lost potentially there? Like what would have that done specifically to the antelope populations?
Yeah. So again, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but I think from an organizational point of view, we certainly spoke out and raised our voice against the sale of public land. It is, we thought long and hard as a board about it and talked about it, and we are not. We are a pronghorn conservation organization, right? Not necessarily a public land conservation organization or a public land access organization. So. I think the first question that we had to answer for ourselves was, why are we doing this? And the reason is fundamentally that access is ownership, right? The wildlife in North America belongs to the people in North America. It's administered by the state wildlife agencies. But the reality is that if all of those critters are yours, but they're bottled up on private land, then you have lost ownership of that critter, right? And so kind of back to the habitat is the first thing you have to focus on. As a hunting organization, as an organization founded by hunters and informed by that perspective, there is no future in sportsman's conservation for pronghorn without public land and without that BLM land and access in the West. So yeah, I mean, it was significant enough threat that we felt like we had to speak out.
And I think it was so upsetting to so many sportsmen, us included, for antelope, but a lot of our frustration is the same as all hunting population, or even beyond hunters, is conservation. Is once that land is sold, it's not coming back. And then there's a fear of kind of a death spiral where none of us want American hunting or that outdoor heritage to become like Europe, where it's the domain of the elites and royalty, this and that. And then good luck telling your future kids to care, or I'm a parent, probably most of us are, good luck inspiring your kids to get into hunting and caring about conservation if they never see the critter. It just seems like once you go down that world, there's no coming out of it. And it's going to just be a bad spiral in literally every sense. And I think that's why so many organizations, totally unrelated, really raised holy hell against it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, like, I think it's easy to have the mindset that, a 2 to 3% land sale, okay, we could lose 2 to 3% of pronghorn habitat, like, right? Like, that seems like a logical jump that someone could make. But I think that, part of what we're trying to support with the North American Pronghorn Foundation is the science and understanding pronghorn movement across the landscape. Because in places like Wyoming and Montana, Nevada, in a lot of pronghorn range, they're not using the landscape the same throughout the year, and that means that they have to move from area to area. And you can cut off a small chunk of potential habitat, but that has outsized impacts on the population. If that area that was to be sold, it was discussed as being for housing development. If you cut out that maybe that was the critical winter range for a herd of pronghorn, sure, they have a ton of summer habitat, and we don't think of pronghorn quite as much having that distinct summer versus winter, like maybe we think of as elk or something like that, but they very certainly do, and that's something that, of course, we're putting the funding and effort towards here in the future. But if you cut off that area, it's just like you can lose an entire herd of pronghorn with one small development. Or we've talked about fences, but roadway passages, like, they're incredibly hard for pronghorn to navigate and to cross. I think that in any type of barrier, whether or not it's fencing, interstate highways, anything like that, have a more profound impact on pronghorn than the other species, large game species on the landscape. Like, pronghorn almost never cross interstates. Like, think of a time where you're on that family road trip, you might see a deer crossing, but I would be willing to bet it's pretty hard to think of a time where you've seen a pronghorn on an interstate. That is because it is a true habitat fragmentation event to get a new road or a fence or things like that, if they're not done in wildlife friendly ways.
Yeah, man, 100%. Like you said, you talked about the funny story about they happen to jump a fence, and I've seen one antelope jump a fence out of the hundreds and hundreds I've seen now. But it's kind of funny watching them. Like, you can kind of mess with them a little bit too. If you're driving a car and it happens to spook them, the random time a car spooks them is they'll run up and down that fence trying to figure out what they want to do.
Yep.
They'll stop and they'll turn around and go backwards the other way. So any little interruption, to your point, is that they that affects an antelope or a pronghorn in ways that it wouldn't affect a deer necessarily, or not as much, right? Like because they'll kind of navigate their habitat different than a pronghorn can or will. And trying to navigate a fence crossing, deer, you're looking for belly hair on the top rung of the wire. Well, in pronghorn, you're looking for the trails literally going underneath and the back hair going under the bottom wire. So, and then I like the point you made there too, Josh. Is like once it's gone, it's gone. The public land here, and so we've got a really unique thing in North America with the number of acres of public land we have, but it's a permanent loss once it's gone, and especially when it goes to housing or something like that. I mean, there's not a lot you can do with it after that. It turns into a landscape that's it's human friendly, but not much else, right? And that's kind of a bummer when we see that. Even growing up in Iowa, that's a place too. It's a lot. I think there's like 2% maybe, or maybe 1 or 2% of the state. I think it's 1% is actually a native prairie. 2% of the state is like public ground. But man, even driving where I grew up, like you hear the stories from your parents. You drive, oh, this used to all be cornfield and whatever, and now it's all big city developed or whatever. And then every time we go back home now, being military, man, it's like, holy crap, dude. I remember like I used to look at that farm like I'd like to own that one day because that's an awesome hunting farm. It's gone. Like it's a development now or the city's expanded or whatever. So yeah, once it's gone, it's gone. You're not getting it back, especially when concrete's poured over it. So as far as your guys is obviously you guys took a stance on it. Did you guys like submit like a public level opinion to your senators? Did you guys come in as an organization? How does that process even look? Because I could pick up the phone and leave my representatives and senators voice messages and things like that. Like how do you guys do it as like a 501c3?
Yeah, so it's a great point, and to get into the kind of nitty gritty of 501c3s, it's important to remember as a nonprofit that only 10% of our time can be used in direct lobbying, right? So we can only say that we can only use 10% of that time. Otherwise, we're no longer complying with the legal restrictions of 501c3. We're no longer a nonprofit in the traditional sense. So we did not make direct action calls as an organization to our congressman. What we did do is several blog posts, a lot of social media, encouraging our members to do that, and pointing out methods and vehicles, and here's how to, here's the Capitol switchboard 202-232. I still remember the numbers. So we encouraged our members, we showed them why, or made the argument why it's important to pronghorn, kind of like we just talked about, and said, hey, like, if you value our hunting heritage and pronghorn and the landscape they live on, it's time to act. And here's a bunch of ways to do it. So that's what we did.
Very cool, man. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know there was that restriction on you guys, with the 10% rules. That's kind of cool. I'm glad we asked that question. And then to your point, the goal of you is to get members and eyeballs on what you guys are doing and support for the projects you guys do. But then that inherently, the audience you build, you guys can kind of cast that net backwards and say, hey guys, you support what we do. Well, here's how you can actually support this in other ways when things like that come up, because you guys unfortunately have a little bit of a restriction there. I never realized that. So that's kind of a cool, just another way that people can support you and take action and kind of on your behalf too, on the things that we all love.
Sure. Yeah. It's fortunate and unfortunate, right? Like I think it makes us focus on the thing we're here to do, which is advocate for pronghorn in their landscape, right? There's a host of other things that are going to affect that, and we can certainly encourage our members to get involved on those things. But the reality is that, and we've talked about this as a board, the thing we got to focus on and the thing we got to be laser focused on is the resource, and so I absolutely think it's appropriate for us to weigh in when we can, and there is going to be direct lobbying in our future at some point, within that 10% rule, but the reality is, like, our focus is the resource, just like DUs or just like, Pheasants Forevers or Rocky Mountain elk, and, if you want to really focus on access, for example, I'd point you towards BHA or, what I mean? Like that, yeah. All these orgs exist for a reason. And I think it's important to honor that reason, especially as a critter org.
I feel like if we're doing our job right, and we are both an educator and an advocate for pronghorn, hopefully we're building greater interest for our members and the people that we're reaching out to, and then we're creating a group that is more interested in interacting with their legislators, commenting on various impacts to our natural resources. And so, I like to hope that we can have those secondary impacts to the people that we're interacting with that hopefully last longer than any single issue as well.
I did want to ask one thing. So you mentioned, Bryan, Nevada a couple different times earlier. Like that's kind of a place where you're seeing maybe population impacts that are restricting tags, or you're not seeing as many antelope on the landscape. Is there something specific to Nevada versus, Wyoming or Montana where it's maybe a little bit easier to see them? Like, is there something specific going on there that maybe kind of help drive the needle and say, hey, we got to take action today?
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good point that various pronghorn herds in different places have different challenges that they face. I think, if we're going to talk about Nevada, some of those ones can be, water limitations or, kind of a broad description of usually the limiting resource for general big game populations in the state, but particularly for pronghorn. There's also a wealth of data out there for the negative impacts of feral horses on the landscape for pronghorn, particularly around competition at water holes. Basically the exclusion of pronghorn by aggressive actions of feral horses. And so, you push all the pronghorn off the water, where are they supposed to go? So I think that what the goals or what the needs of pronghorn look like in different states can certainly vary. I think Wyoming and Montana, it can be more in the realm of freedom of movement, when that might be that their needs are to better understand it at the first level. And so that's like a GPS collar study. And then, wildlife friendlier fencing is the boots on the ground type of projects, or wildlife crossings as well on a larger scale, versus, like the desert Southwest, where maybe more of the challenges are around, resource competition with, maybe invasives or, just general water limitations and, the desert setting.
Go ahead, Josh.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And just to chime in a little bit too, like Bryan said earlier, kind of your point about habitat will always be of paramount importance, but there's so many different projects that are unique to the different areas. And so one of our first things once we became like official was we contacted the biology or fish and game departments of each state to kind of learn the issues. And so we came to learn that Wyoming, of course, has the most. I think it's like 350 or 400,000 antelope, pronghorn. Now I'm doing it too. And then Montana is second, like 150-ish thousand. And then New Mexico is third. So I, by coincidence, talked to the New Mexico biologist, and their big issue there was, especially in the northeast part, was drought. So some projects there is just guzzlers. And I know in Nevada that David Goff guy, board member, he sent an email that like Nevada, if people have trucks and they want to help, it's just Nevada will load up your truck with water, and they have these guzzlers. So this kind of a drought situation maybe is applicable in Nevada. In New Mexico, like Bryan said, the fencing really impedes migration corridors in Montana and Wyoming. And so there's ways to make the fences where the farmers are happy, but it's not scalping the animals as they go underneath it, to raise it up a little bit and make the lower wire smooth. So it kind of makes it interesting and fun, but also challenging in that it's just so many different potential projects. And then the research is also important, because if migration is so key, but you don't know the migration corridor unless you have GPS collar. So it's a kind of we end up becoming a de facto jack of all trades kind of an organization by necessity.
You kind of hit on one of the key things that we balance earlier. You talked about, is it the habitat or is it the critter? And I think this is another one that we have to balance too, right? So, we spend a lot of our time talking about state fish and wildlife organizations, fish and game, depending on which state you're in. But the other one that we really have to deal with is a federal interface, and we've got to ensure that the habitats that those pronghorn exist on are being managed in a way that is conducive to long-term viability for pronghorn, right? So we need to be that voice to those federal agencies. And I'll tell you, and I am not anti-BLM at all. I think they do a lot with a little, and they're tasked with a huge job, and are, pretty chronically understaffed and underfunded. But one of the things in Nevada specifically that we're really, really concerned with is not just that there are feral horses and burros on the landscape, but that the populations of those are so far above AML, allowable management level, right? So that's the BLM, when the Wild Horse and Burro Act passed, and then when it was revised, came out and said, hey, like each of these horse management areas needs to have X population based on scientific assessment of the resources available. And I will tell you that in Nevada, almost everyone, so more than 90% of them, are at least double AML or higher. And some of them are, 300 or 400 animals against an AML of 0. So the wild horse and burros are absolutely crushing the landscape diversity, biodiversity, and pronghorn specifically in Nevada. That's just a reality. So
they drink a lot of water and eat a lot of feed.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was that bad. I mean, it was like rough on other species and stuff, but man, the numbers that you just said that's insane. Yep. Do you feel like if you guys talking with fish and game agencies more directly and stuff, is there any talk of like management solutions on any of that? Or is it just kind of like this public opinion is still king and they're maybe holding back because they're afraid of, the idea that you could go hunt a zebra that's not striped, I guess. Like,
yeah, this is a tough one, right? One of the things that I think most people don't understand about horses and burros, whether you call them wild or feral, depending on, the act is the wild horse and burro. But I'm a fan of feral for a host of reasons that we can get into over a beer and a phone call at some point. But long story short, they're federally managed, right? So that the management of those horses and burros is not turned over to state fish and game agencies. I think specifically because of what you're talking about, right? They're being managed by the BLM, and the BLM is tasked with making sure that not only do they set AMLs, but that the number of animals on the landscape match AML. And in the revised Horse and Burro Act, they removed any potential lethal management, right? So the BLM has their hands tied in terms of they can't shoot those animals, they can't euthanize those animals, they can't get sportsmen to take part in managing those animals right now, nor can they round them up and then send them to a country where they might be turned into some sort of food product for whatever, whether it's your dog or you. Despite the fact that plenty of the world eats horses, we have a pretty soft palate for it. And by law, the BLM has had their hands tied with the removal of those management tools. And I'll tell you that, you're a life member. Thank you for your support. You're going to get a bunch of mailings from us and a newsletter from us shortly that's going to outline some of these problems in Nevada and what we're going to look to get accomplished in the next year or so in regard to horses.
Very cool, man. So you guys are definitely boots in the ground, taking action to do what we can to maybe start getting some of those better solutions going.
I'd love to get to the point where we're boots on the ground, but right now we're really just advocating for the legal changes necessary to make sure that that problem gets managed by the BLM.
That's what I meant. Sorry, maybe wrong term, but yeah, exactly. You guys are actively moving in that and trying to make changes to allow other changes to happen to hopefully bring about bigger change. No, that's great. And then as far as you talked about each state kind of having their own maybe isolated or individual need to support the animals, support the landscape. Are you guys looking at diversifying into like a chapter organization? Or are you guys going to keep it all big national level? What are your guys' plans for that? Or do you have plans for that yet?
Yep. So we made a conscious decision as a board to start with a national organization. I can't read the future, but I will tell you that I think it's highly unlikely that we stay only a national organization for the whole duration. We started that way for a host of reasons. We want to make sure that we have our ducks in a row and an efficient model that's able to adequately support the resource. Kind of like we talked about with the 501c3 thing. We don't want to focus early on developing state chapters, right? We want to focus the limited resources we have exactly on the critter. And the landscapes that support them. And so we certainly have an eye to making sure that we can involve people at the state level. That local action is super important to both showing our credibility as an organization and keeping people engaged and involved. But as a organization that is dedicated to the resource and the landscape that sustains it, I think the key decision for us is making sure that we have that locked down and wired tight before we start spreading chapters.
What's up, guys? This is Aaron. I just want to take a quick break and let you guys know that this episode is brought to you by Dead Nuts Outdoors, makers of 100% made in the USA 2D animal targets. That's right, life-size 2D targets that go on any backstop and take your practice ranges in the backyard to the next level. Get yourself 10% off by using code Prayin and Slayin, or click that link in the show notes. You're going to get 10% off, and a portion of the proceeds are going to go back to our veterans and conservation mission. Thank you so much, Dead Nuts Outdoors, for the support. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Something I'll add to that one for our listeners here is, we're 12 board members strong, but we're also a volunteer organization at this point. And so, to really hit on Eric's point there, that we want to be really efficient with our time and make sure that it's having, true impacts to pronghorn and, measurable impacts to pronghorn. Is we don't want to be spending all of our resources and time right now setting up those additional layers. And so the more efficient we can be right now, the better work we can do with the bandwidth that we currently have. But we're also
Yeah.
really excited that we're starting to get more and more outreach from members and prospective members and various folks in the community that really want to help. And so we recognize that as we grow and develop, we'll be adding, additional components and, everything as those become available to us as an organization.
And I'll just add my 2 cents quick in that. I feel very fortunate to be part of a group of people when we met together for the first time on Zoom, essentially, just to start a GoFundMe to raise the money to make the 501c3. That way the members could have the tax write-off and whatnot. But I'm actually probably the least well situated as a board member in terms of how my job can directly help the group. So I do what I can, and I've been doing the merchandising. But what I mean by that is we have a couple accountants we have on the board. We have people that are quite high ranking. That guy Dean that Eric alluded to, he's very high up in Pheasants Forever. Our guy Brock is high up in BHA. So my point I'm getting to is a lot of people took their past experience from their volunteer in other organizations and did not want to reinvent the wheel. So they have learned this is the way other organizations have learned and grown. So we use their backstory, and a lot of people's talents, like Bryan is our kind of IT guy. Eric obviously is an excellent spokesman. So we've been very blessed that this hodgepodge of us that were cobbled together through the internet, a lot of people's talents from their job and their personal lives were very helpful to hopefully make this an efficient organization. And that's part of the reason that these people smarter than me with more experience said, let's pump the brakes on state chapters for now.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a great move. All the stuff you guys said, honestly, I think the one thing I've gathered just again, working with it for about 10 years and work with a bajillion different conservation organizations is the one thing you get when it comes down to the volunteer level, especially at the state chapter, is usually your chapter presidents or your regional directors. They all say the same thing. Their job is herding cats. So, at the end of the day, it's working with volunteers, and it's more managing people than it is maybe managing a resource to achieve a mission, right? Like, and that's just a product of the game you play. Yeah, and I love what you just brought into that too, Josh, is the American Bear Foundation, Joe Condelis. I had him on the podcast, and they're a small, tight-knit national level organization. I think they've got some state things going on where individuals take it upon themselves to allow that to happen. But if you are listening to this and you've got some talent and you just got a heart to give back to anything conservation, maybe in this case it's specifically pronghorn, utilizing the skills that you have in your day job, maybe a side hustle that you got that you're good at doing internet or social media or accounting or like all these different things, like a 501c3 needs all these pieces to operate. And you said it, taking everybody's heads, putting them in one room, and it's a bunch of different people from a bunch of different backgrounds that said, hey, we care about the same thing. But it takes a lot of work to do what you guys do and to make an organization run and to be something as, quote unquote, simple as building a website, right? Like, some organizations have to come up with funds to pay somebody because they don't know how to do it, but there's other ones that someone on your team might know how to do that, or maybe you do and you care about pronghorn and you decide, hey, can I help you guys in some way, right? So I think it's easy to get caught up in the traditional sense of like, becoming a member, I pay my $35-$45 a year, or life member, or this or that. But there's 1,000 ways you can give back and really help an organization get its feet off the ground and support their mission in other ways. And I love that you called that out, because that's a really cool thing. And like I said, the American Bear Foundation called it out on our podcast too, is like, they need help just managing membership payments and stuff that come in, right? Like, and then the website tasks and little things that you just wouldn't think about when you think about the big picture of a conservation organization. So that's really cool.
Yeah, just some context too on that note. Like, it's easy to think, like, you see our website and you're like, oh, it looks great. These guys have been around forever, and I'm sure they have a professional team managing their website. No. Like, context. Right. We opened our doors in April. So It is, as we sit here, it's the end of July 2025. We opened our doors in April of 2025. The 12 of us on the board are the 12 of us. There is no professional staff. It is us. And I will tell you, we don't want you to not want to be involved. We want you to want to be involved. We don't have state chapters right now. We're probably headed that way, but in the meantime, email us, info@pronghorns.org, go to the website, hit contact us, and come take a look. When you send that email, to give you an idea how small and efficient we're trying to be, it's going to go to a board member. Like, the 12 of us get that email. Like, there's nobody reading it and screening it and, putting it in a queue for someone to maybe get it. Like, we're it. So, we're small, we're responsive. We're eager to hear from our members. We're eager to hear from people who are interested in pronghorn at the state level. And I guarantee you that, we will show you through our actions on the ground that we're going to get some stuff done to take care of the critter in the landscape. So reach out with your ideas, reach out with your talents, and we're more than happy to have them and more than happy to put them to work. So
one other statement I just wanted to make for our listeners here is, because I'm sure many of the people listening to this are members of other conservation organizations in the greater conservation space, and I just have to say we are so grateful for the open arms acceptance and support we have gotten from the greater community. It is so it fills my cup so much to have the conversations with Wild Sheep representatives from the Wild Sheep Foundation or other like-minded organizations that are like, hey, here's what we've learned, here's what we think you could do and have success. And it is has saved us from bashing our head against the wall a lot of times. We're still figuring it out and everything, but just it warms my heart to think about how great of a community this is, and to be thinking about all of the great organizations that we're trying to be a part of, because we certainly don't look at ourselves as competitors to the Wild Sheep Foundation or Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and it's been amazing that's been reciprocated and that they've invested in us for our success. And so I just have to state that to all of our listeners, that boy, has it been an amazing industry to be a part of.
Yeah, that's so cool. Especially, and you guys talked about, you were talking about some of that background stuff where some of the board members even are from different organizations and say, hey, we've learned maybe the hard way that this is not the way to do something versus this was the way to do something. And the amount of just passion people have for, the conservation's anything, whether it's the animal, the habitat, and bringing all that together to just better ideas or lessons that are hard learned in one capacity don't mean that it has to be hard for everybody that's a startup, right? And bringing all those ideas together to elevate and honestly, it just makes the impact that much faster because you guys don't have to learn lessons the hard way or do something that someone's already learned. So that's really cool that all you guys all the support you have from all those organizations is coming together that way. I know, again, just working in that space, you talk with, depending on, I've just worked in it enough and seen it from the company level and different things. A lot of it is competitive in some areas, there's just natural competition that happens, but knowing that at the end of the day, the mission that you support in the conservation space out of the whole outdoors industry, we all care about the same stuff at the end of the day, and that's seeing critters on a landscape that we can go chase and create memories around. And so knowing that the organizations all have that same passion and are working together to make things better across the board is awesome. I love hearing that. Well, cool, man. Well, do you guys have any partnerships or anything that you guys are working on currently, whether it be, product opportunities or if there's companies? I know we got a lot of people that own or are part of different companies in various capacities that in the outdoor space that do this. I've worked in the conservation, fundraising space for a long time. Do you guys have anything on the horizons for that, or how companies could get involved in maybe helping you guys, or other partnerships you guys are doing that are strategic to your growth?
Yeah, sure. We have, I will say we've been very fortunate. We've talked about it a bit here in the last few minutes, but we've worked with quite a few organizations already. A big shout out to the Wild Sheep Foundation, had us on their podcast. Looking forward to seeing their members at Sheep Show. We'll have a booth at Sheep Show there. BHA, so Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Our first public event was Rendezvous. So Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Rendezvous. We were there and, had a booth and met a lot of great people and did some great stuff. We made some connections there as well. American Prairie, give a shout out to those guys. They have been an early and eager partner and working some boots on the ground stuff. TRCP, so the Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, has been a fantastic ally and gives us some wink wink. Take a look over here. There's an opportunity, that kind of stuff, and have been great. We put stakeholder partnerships in our mission, and there's a reason for that, right? None of this gets done by itself. So there's a host of basically every state fish and game agency in the West has been a partner. WAFWA, the Organization of Fish and Wildlife Professionals. We could go on and on and on. So yeah, it's been great. I will say from a corporate perspective, we are standing up a corporate partnership program. The idea there being, as you've seen with many other organizations, the opportunity for that corporation to partner with us, having direct access to our members, obviously some prominent marketing there, as well as making a contribution to our conservation efforts. I'll give an early shout out to Stone Glacier, who helped us with, our early life member and founding life member vests. So thanks a bunch for the treatment there. But I would look. We do not as yet have a corporate partner per se, but that program is coming out here soon, and we're certainly vetting and looking for folks to be that partner. I think the world is wide open, and one of the key pitches that we're making to those corporate partners is that the same one we just made, that we're small, we're efficient, and we're directly focused on the resource. So your money and your time is not going to go to overhead. It's not going to go to it's not going to go to paying office staff. It's going to go to the resource. So if you're looking to enhance your footprint and your impact on conservation, we are certainly willing and able to do that.
Very cool, man. Awesome stuff. Yeah, you guys definitely have got some great things going on. And what other shows are you guys going to be at? You mentioned Sheep Show. Obviously, you guys got a list of shows you all have booths at this year. Because definitely excited to hopefully get to a couple and see what you guys got going on there.
Yeah, so like I said, we'll be at Sheep Show there. We're looking at WAFWA as well. The guys back me up here on this one. I got to go back to the minutes to look at. We're just talking at the last board meeting about what we're gonna do. If you guys know off the top of your head, by all means, please give a shout.
Yeah, and we have a couple of different shows and events that we're on the wait list for, so I wouldn't want to commit to them for our listeners and then not be there. So this is something that we're still actively working on. It'll be in some of our upcoming newsletters and announcements, and I'm sure we'll have it on our website and everything. So as people are listening to this, hopefully we have a more fully fleshed out show and event plan. But we are also kind of near most of the we've kind of wrapped up the 2025 show schedule for the most part, and so we're looking mostly at 2026 at this point. We're going to be in Wyoming here though in a few weeks. But the name of that event is escaping me at this moment.
Oh no, yeah, that's the fishing game, the fishing game meeting, the quarterly meeting. So expect to head to that, talking about some migration stuff, as well as just giving the professionals there an overview of what we're about. So
yeah, and then also just
Andy, we'll see you there.
There is so many varied topics in an organization like this that even though there's the 12 of us and it's volunteered, we've kind of chosen to subdivide things so we don't have death by committee, and we all just kind of give our long-winded spiel during our board meetings that we have once a month. So we have a committee sub-team of 3 or 4 of us to kind of parse through, and sometimes just for efficiency's sake and finance's sake, we obviously will pick shows that are close to us because we don't really want to pay money to send people elsewhere if someone happens to live right there. So for a lot of us, when we had that BHA rendezvous meeting in Missoula, Montana, roughly a month ago, many of us just drove there out of our own pocket because it was cheap and convenient. So that's a consideration too, just to let people know how frugal and respectful we're trying to be with finances, to not send people, to just get 2 birds with 1 stone. If someone lives within a drive and is willing to show up to a show, more power to them. But the short answer is, more things will be coming down the pipe, and we have a committee team to kind of look at that. The same way the accountants are on a finance team, we have a handful of different teams for efficiency's sake.
No, I love that. And coming from, again, background in the industry, trade shows are expensive, right? Like the booth costs one thing, but usually your personnel costs to get someone there, feed them, all the stuff. There's a lot of expense that can happen there, travel, plane tickets, yada, yada, yada. And then you guys being a small team, that adds a whole nother element of limitation there. That makes all total sense. And then just me thinking off the cuff here. So let's say you guys have a member, myself, literally anybody that's a member, is that an opportunity if they had a trade show? Is that something you guys would take in an email saying, hey man, I'm free the weekend of XYZ show? Are you guys open to that concept, or to help get the awareness out there?
100%. Send stuff along. If there's a show you'd like to see us at, or something that is near and dear to your heart, by all means hit us up. And I'd be remiss too if I didn't tell you how to do that. So come on over. Our website is pronghorns.org. So pronghorns with an S, PRONGHORNS.org. A lot of ways to contact us there. The info at pronghorns.org would be the email address, but you can hit contact us through there. Also, all our memberships are available on the website. So 3 membership levels that I think you talked about: the annual member, starting at $35 there, the sponsor member, which is an annual member, at $250, comes with a sweet mug that you also saw. And then if you're absolutely pronghorn fanatic and are dedicated to making a big statement on behalf of Pronghorn, we do offer a life membership at $1,500. that is going to include that mug as well as a Stone Glacier vest. So, come on over, check us out, join. I will tell you that the single biggest thing you can do to help us and to help Pronghorn right now is to join. That also, on the communications front, will get you signed up for our newsletter. So you'll get our quarterly newsletter. It's somewhere between quarterly and monthly right now, but looking at like a quarterly newsletter, and then all of our member communications will also come directly to you in your email there. If you're a social media fan, you can catch us at both Instagram and Facebook at NAPF, so North American Pronghorn Foundation, NAPF_official. And that'll get you there both with Facebook and Instagram as well. And, any comments you have, we'll be happy to take there via DM. So that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of us. And, Aaron, the direct answer to your question is we want to hear from our members, and that is the easiest way to do it. So yeah, if there's something you want to see from us, by all means, let us know. So
awesome, man. No, very cool. And we'll link to this stuff all in the show notes as well. And then we put out a couple social posts around your guys' podcast launch as well. We'll be sure to link them in there too, so you guys can reach out to pronghorns.org. We got info@pronghorns.org, and obviously your guys' social media handles too. But you heard the man. Biggest thing you guys can do is join. It's a simple membership is the best way. And then, like you said, you get involved in all the different things. And if you have ideas, these guys are small but mighty, and your skills beyond your wallet can help out in other ways probably too. So if you like talking to people, it sounds like maybe even trade shows or other things like that might just be something up your alley. So
100%.
Awesome. Well, very cool, guys. Well, if you guys have anything else before we jump into my favorite part of most of these episodes, this whole thing's been awesome for me, but with you guys being around Pronghorn, but going to get into some hunting stories from each of you if you guys have them. I know Josh has got some just slammers on the wall behind him. I don't know which one you're going to pick, dude, but those are sweet. Anything else you want to say before we jump into some hunting stories?
I guess just one thing I would just want to mention is to be on the lookout for some announcements on the projects that we have in the works right now. We're finalizing some numbers and partnerships on a couple of opportunities. One of them hopefully will be in the near future here, shortly after this podcast is released. So I can't talk a whole lot about them yet. But we're working hard on actually having that impact that we started this organization for.
Yeah, no, I'm super proud. We made a vote as a board yesterday, literally 2 days ago. Sorry, 2 days ago now, to authorize our first substantial on the ground project. And I will tell you that for an org that is less than 4 months old, I was pretty stunned at the amount we were able to get done. So yeah, guys, it's super exciting. Look for an announcement here shortly. But I wish we could tell you more, but come on over, look for it on the website, look for it on social, come on over and join, and you'll get the first email of the announcement there. So big stuff, and we're really excited.
Well, good stuff, guys. Well, this has been huge. I'll never say the word antelope again. They'll just toss that out there. Pronghorn is the only thing coming out of my mouth unless I'm talking about African game species. But man, let's hear some awesome pronghorn stories. I don't know who wants to start, but like I said, Josh, you're kind of been teasing me this whole time with the $2 you have over your shoulher, dude. One is super wide and one's got some crazy mass and maybe like a quote unquote non-typical as it goes by a pronghorn standard.
The one on the farthest left is kind of like a chipped off horn, and that probably is my favorite story. The very first antelope, it's a shoulder mount and downstairs in my living room, and that's the one that just immediately smitten me. That was the first buck, the first big game animal I'd ever shot. That first one was I was so pumped. I remember running around in circles like a little boy screaming, "Thank you." Just so happy. But that was more of the stereotypical kind of a hunt where I had seen it a ways away, hiked through some coulees, did a belly crawl and popped it. And it was definitely a nice, totally respectable antelope. And if I only got to keep 3 mounts or 2 mounts, like as I retire or whatever, downsized, that would certainly be one of them. But the following year, I had kind of like wanted to see if I could get a bigger one. And so I had done some scouting in central Montana, and I kind of had a plan, which, as we talked about earlier, how antelope will jump a fence, but they're kind of loath to, was I got up early, hiked to this back corner of some fenced area, and my thought was all the road hunters will kind of push them to the fence, and then I'll be on the receiving end. So I got up ultra early, hiked pretty deep in there, and just kind of sat, listened to some music in my earbuds, and waited for the sun to rise for a solid hour. And I was thinking my plan was going to come right to action, and I start seeing some movement on the horizon. And I'm like, oh, sweet. What am I going to do here? Next thing I know, 50 yards away, I didn't at the time know that bucks, maybe females too, they can make kind of this odd call, and I don't really want to mimic it here for our listeners. But
you sure, Josh? I'd love to hear it.
It's like
I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like a crow or a cat. It's a weird noise. But anyways, this nice big antelope that was immediately obvious right at first sunrise. I don't think the opening day of the season was more than 10 minutes old. And I'm thinking I'm going to have to do a big stalk and do a shoot and whatever, and this elaborate plan of the hunters. And I don't even think the hunters from the road had the chance to push them to me. The thing, like Bryan mentioned with his dad's t-shirt story, are naturally curious, especially on opening day. They wise up pretty quick after, after opening weekend. If your truck slows to less than 10 miles an hour, they'll take off. But that first opening morning, the thing was curious to me. So it ran right up, took a look at me, did its weird call. It was clear to be a shooter. I just dropped down on one knee, and in the end, we talk about long range, 300, 400, 500-yard shot. This was a 50-yard shot, chip shot, but I'll take it. I mean, I still earned it the hard way. I hiked in a good couple miles and sat and bided my time, but the actual shooting sequence was a little bit anticlimactic, but it became my biggest antelope. And so I put the Euro mount there, and I learned a lot, including that they make that interesting call when they're kind of startled or curious. I'm not entirely sure why. So yeah, those first 2 years I moved to Montana certainly gave me some big memories between getting my first big game animal ever and then shooting a bigger species bigger specimen the next year. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, very cool, man. If you don't mind me asking, being a Montana antelope and that kind of being the place I stomped around the most for them, do you, was it a specific central, west, or eastern part of the state, or?
It was kind of central in the mid part of the state. And for me, the way I've been doing it is I just want to tag. And in Montana, one thing I've been buying bonus points. Or preference points, I think they call them. I've never hunted antelope in Wyoming, but I've been every year for the last 5 or 6 years, been buying a preference point. I think when I hit certain magical number of birthdays, like I'm 45, maybe on my 50th, once I get enough points, I'll probably cash them in, because I would love to be in a district like Wyoming where I could pick and choose. A lot of the Montana districts, you can't be choosy, or you may not get for a real nice one. But That being said, paramount to me is just getting a tag, because like Bryan and them mentioned, it's harder and harder to get a tag. So most states maybe do this. Montana does. They'll publish the draw statistics. So when I'm like thinking where I may want to hunt, I'll look at a combination of which districts are the draw odds a little bit higher, because that can vary wildly in Montana and probably a lot of states. If you're outside of a major city, your draw odds probably stink. Other communities maybe aren't so much. But then the second dimension, in addition to just getting the tag, is will there be land to hunt? Like maybe the draw odds in some district are quite high, but if that district is all private land, then that's not going to do you a whole lot of good. So in my mind, I varied up where I apply, but it's usually two factors in Montana that make me apply. How likely am I to get a tag? Is it like a greater than 50 or greater than 75% draw odd versus something in the low teens? And looking at Onyx or whatever app you use, or just your map, your Gazette or whatever, will there be places for me to hike around? So these antelope in the wall were central Montana, but that was just kind of luck as a function of the two factors that are paramount in how I personally choose to go chase them.
That's awesome, dude. That's a great strategy there. Yeah, that's a big thing to think about, because there are some units that maybe they're easier to draw, but man, like you said, trying to find a place, or maybe it's only got one decent section that is big, but you get out there opening day, dude, and it's like, a pumpkin farm. There's people everywhere, and your best bet's probably to do what you did, get out there in the dark and hope people push them to you. I've watched I don't know how many groups of people in some of the central Montana units, just that's where we were stationed. Going out to different places to hunt is you watch people shoot antelope off of other people. Like one person's crawling up this hill this way, and the other person's coming up the backside, and you're on the road watching it all, and someone just happens to shoot it first. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a good state to chase them in. There's all kinds of, and the crazy part about Montana too that I loved is like every part of the state's totally different, like in terms of views and terrain and how you can chase them and stuff. So that's awesome. What caliber were you using for your 50-yard long bomb on that guy?
I was using a 270. That was my go-to for a long time. Now I sometimes use a 7mm 08. And another part that's just so cool about antelope hunting is you're usually visiting parts of the country that seem more real and legit. They're not touristy, so it can be so fun going to like a small town brewery or bar or restaurant, and these communities normally don't see visitors very often. They're usually farming or so rural. So you really get to kind of meet and chit chat with like legit, honest, hardworking people. Like I live in Western Montana now, which is very beautiful, but in some ways it doesn't seem as real, because it's so touristy, and there's a place for that. I get it, but it's kind of fun to just be forced to go to a more rural area and just talk to farmers and people that don't normally cross paths with. So I enjoy the after hunting as much as I do the hunting half the time, just seeing country and meeting people I don't normally cross paths with and seeing cool little places.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And I laughed when you said that because during COVID, my buddy and I both drew antelope tags that year, and we were running around just looking for antelope, and it was just overcrowded in the area that we were. So we went to a whole different part of the unit. Driving around, I'm not going to name the name of the little town we drove into, but it was about lunchtime, and there was a bar open, and nobody's supposed to be congregating anywhere, right? But there's cars parked in front of one building in this entire town, and we're like, okay, cool, like
Yeah.
I guess we're gonna stop here for lunch. And so we went in, and we walk in, and the signs posted, because it's a restaurant, so they had to have the mask mandates and stuff. And anyway, it says must wear a mask to enter. And so we both, we had them in our pocket. We put them on. We weren't really sure. We walk in, dude, and the place was like kind of chattery. It went stone cold quiet. Everybody it was just like a Western movie. Everybody at the bar like slowly turns around. They look at the door, and we both kind of stand there for a second. We're like, and there's people like actively eating, and they like put their sandwiches down, and we're like, are we gonna get shot? Or like, this is weird. He's got New Jersey license plates because he's Air Force. And anyway, I end up going, well, I guess if you want to try to find a table, I'll go up to the bar and see if I can get a menu. And I walk up, and the lady literally told me, she goes, can I help you? I said, yeah. I said, we're going to get some lunch if that's okay. And this dude, big, brawny farmer, grabs the menus that are actively sitting between me and him, slides them over in front of himself, hands them to her. Like I thought she was going to hand them to me. I was like, that's kind of strange. She takes them, puts them away. She goes, we're not serving lunch today, sir. And I like look around, everybody else is eating. I'm like, okie dokie. So we just turned around and walked out. I was like, this is the most strange situation I've ever been in my life. But I'm sure any other situation, non-COVID year, probably would have been exactly like you said. Everybody probably would have chatterbox, normal Montana, they'll be happy to talk to you, whatever, dude. But it was the craziest scenario I've ever walked into in my life.
Yeah.
But not normal Montana. I'm going to state that to you. Like that wasn't normal. That was definitely a memory I'll never forget, is like feeling like I needed to have a pistol on my belt or something, like with an old Western movie or something.
Well, another quick, crazy small town story is my wife is immigrant. I met her in residency in Chicago. She's from Lithuania. And one of the years when she was hunting with me in central Montana, I got a flat tire. So I rushed in and was able to get the tire fixed the night before the opener. And the tire guy caught her reference. He's like, oh, are you from Lithuania? Which kind of blew my mind that he would have picked up on that. And he said he had worked in the wind industry, and a lot of these Western states have windmills. And she said, yeah. And he kind of talked to her about Lithuania a little bit because he had been there as part of the wind industry. And then that local mechanic, the tire repair guy obviously knows the mechanic. They work a little bit hand in hand or refer business. That mechanic had just married a Lithuanian a year prior. So then he gave us the phone number. And the very next morning, my wife and this person who from Vilnius, the lady, so what are the odds of this town, population less than 1,000, two people are speaking Lithuanian, and that country only has like 2 million people. So just kind of how these small town charms and connections can like manifest right in front of your eyes. That never ceased to amaze me there. That was quite a highlight here in Lithuania in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, man. Well, awesome. Well, I'm glad you're two, and that's the one that he's got that huge fork out front. Is that the one you shot with the 270, the 50-yard story?
No, the one that with the real wide fork, that's 2 years ago. That year I shot. Now I kind of like to use a 7mm 08. I have a brother who lives in Alaska, so I visited him to go deer hunting on Kodiak Island. He lives in Homer, so he took a ferry over. So I wanted like a real lightweight rifle for Kodiak Island that could handle saltwater because we were getting kind of ferried ashore each day. But I fell in love with that 7mm 08. So that's become kind of my go-to. I don't have a huge arsenal. I just kind of am a one-trick pony. So I have the one gun that I love and I use it all the time and I feel super comfortable. And so my 270 has become a bit of a safe queen. I broke the stock, so I have a brand new stock on it now. And so the 270 is like my beater. I mean, the 708 is my beater, and the 270 I'll probably give to a grandkid one day. It's the safe queen. And yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I've got my 270 was my wife. I didn't know it was tradition when you rank up as an officer. Apparently, you get your spouse like a gift or something. Like when she went from lieutenant to captain, and then we were getting ready to move to Montana. So I waited for the first gun show that was out there, and she goes, "Hey, like I'm, just want to let you know you can go get a gun. Like pick out any gun you want. I was gonna buy you one, but like go pick." I'm like, "This is the best day of my life." Okay, cool. We're going to a gun show. It's first weekend in Montana. And we go up there, and I went through all the tables, and I kept coming back to this one. There was a Winchester Model 70 featherweight, just beautiful stock, just classic rifle. But yeah, it's a 270 as well, and yeah, that's got my first mule deer with that. My wife got her first whitetail with that, both in Montana. And then as far as hunting, well, I got two more mule deer with it on a hunt I took a buddy on to teach him how to hunt actually. So it's got some stories on it, but it's a safe queen. It's too pretty of a gun. I fell down on that last mule deer hunt I took it on and put a nice little scratch in the stock, and so I got that fixed. And I'm like, okay, you're going in the safe. Yeah, you're going to a grandkid or something exactly like you said someday. You're too pretty of a gun. You got your stories now. Like let's I'll go grab something that I can beat the crap out of. So no, I totally get it, man. Awesome. Well, Eric or Bryan, who else has a story to back that one up?
This is a little different, a horse of a different flavor, or horse of a different color, I guess, as they say. Flavor is probably not the right answer there, but anyway. So I certainly have worked my way through the 1-point draw units, the 2-point draw units, like the busy ones that we talked about there, and I finally I got to a pretty good point. Drew a nice Wyoming tag. Went with a buddy. He was coming from Washington. I was in Omaha, Nebraska on orders at the time. So, we met in the middle, central Wyoming area. And I tagged out early. It was great. Like I had been up there for 2 days. I think I saw the first day $45, probably eight or nine shooters. It was just like not a single orange hat in sight. Like it was epic. Wow. So just those incredible experiences are out there. So it's keep applying and we'll keep doing the work to keep pronghorn on the ground. But so that happened. My buddy gets there and he's like, well, what the heck, and I'm like, well, don't worry about it. Like, we'll have a great hunt, and so we kind of hunted that area, and I, showed him a couple bucks, and he's like, yeah, it's great, but we have 5 days, like, let's take our time. And so we were checking out another area, got in the truck, and we're driving down a standard Wyoming county road, right, which looks like 2.5 lanes wide. You got the big 6 or 8 foot ditches on either side, and coming through a little swale. So we go up over this hill and come down to this little swale, and we kicked up a little herd of pronghorn. And I'm an athlete, and I get really into physiology, and I get really into like watching critters do their thing. And this is like the iconic pronghorn moment to me. So we kick up this little herd of pronghorn, and they just take off parallel on the county road, right? Kind of just, I don't know, I don't know what that was, but I don't like it. We're going to get out of here. So we're going 45 miles an hour, and they are just there. They're maybe 60 yards off the right-hand side of the truck, just hanging there with us, 45 miles an hour. You could have put a cup of water on their back. They're just smooth as could be, across this broken landscape that'll break your ankle as quick as it will look at you, right? So they do that for maybe half a mile. We're just like, look at this, isn't this cool? These pronghorn are following us. This is pretty awesome. And all of a sudden, I don't know what was coming up, or if they just decided they wanted to cross that road, but they put the hammer down. Absolutely put the hammer down, and pulled about 200 yards ahead of us it felt like in about 200 yards. They just went from 45 to 55. And just like you were passing somebody on the highway, they went out in front of us, went immediately like 90 left, go, and down across that ditch, up over the road, down across the other ditch at 55 miles an hour, and disappeared off in the middle of nowhere, and never broke a stride. Just like it was nothing, 55 miles an hour. It was incredible. Most incredible thing I've ever seen. So I'd hunted pronghorn before. I'd been lucky to harvest a couple times. But I'll tell you what, that was the thing that made me a pronghorn nut. Like, just what a crazy, amazing critter, and what an athlete, just so cool.
Oh man, that is cool. Yeah, and that's the crazy part. Like you said, they can be cruising, and I've never seen it like that, but I've just seen them going across the field, and then they just whatever, like you said, some switch flips, and they just decide they're going to kick it up a notch, and it's seamless. They just they just go faster, and they're all as a herd. They all move in unison. It's like watching that flock of birds, but mammals on the ground doing it. It's pretty nuts. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm an aviator, and the only analog I can come up with, the only thing like that I've ever done is, when you click over into Afterburner and the jet just like, and I mean they don't literally have afterburners, but man, they've got that extra gear that just when they need to put it on, they can just absolutely leave anything in the dust, and it's cool. It's why they're still here, and it was awesome to get to see it. So,
Well, Bryan, I hope you've got something that can top these two guys, dude, because unfortunately you're going last.
Well, I might go a slightly different direction with this one. I mean, I must say, like, pronghorn or what got me going for archery hunting. My first pronghorn was with a bow. That was an incredible experience. Sometimes I still think back to that one, and I think more about, like, the salamander that I was playing with right before it came in. I was sitting in a water hole on, like, like August 18th or whatever it was. And say sometimes we do suffer on a pronghorn hunt. But a couple of the ones I actually wanted to highlight, similar to Eric's. The first one would be about speed, and the other one would be circling back to curiosity. And so neither one of these are particularly hunting stories, but just, I think, just highlights just how cool of a species we're talking about. And so one was last summer. I was watching a small herd of pronghorn. It was, maybe 8 or 10 does or so, and a couple of really little fawns. And I've been watching them with the spotting scope and my binoculars. I was in a nice elevated spot. And just watching it, they couldn't have been but a couple days old. Like, I mean, they're still, like, pretty wobbly legged, total goofy. If you're not familiar with what a fawn pronghorn looks like, they're super cute and adorable. But I was watching them, and then I watch all the does just lock onto something. And I think I switched over to binoculars right at that time, and because I was trying to figure out what it was, and I was like, oh, it's a coyote coming trotting up. And what I didn't realize is, I'd seen a couple of the fawns, but there was another fawn that was closer between those does and this coyote. And so I just remember this, like, moment where it's like, this coyote's coming up, and all of a sudden a little fawn stands up, and that coyote goes, oh, this is lunchtime, right? And that fawn took off like greased lightning. And I just remember I had binoculars at that point, and I just remember panning over with this, and I'm watching it probably 1,000 yards, so, like, I'm not close at all. And I just remember, like, how quickly I lost sight of the coyote that immediately took up pursuit.
yeah.
From my frame, right? Like, it was just like I'm just watching, and all of a sudden now I can't even see them both on the same screen in my binoculars. And so it's just like, just they are so wicked fast, even from such an incredibly young age. And so just there's something else that makes them special. And then the other one I'll do, this is in a place where we can't hunt. This is a Yellowstone National Park story. But the curiosity of pronghorn. So it starts with a grizzly bear with 2 really young cubs. I was watching her. She was on a kill, and ended up getting bumped off of that kill, and really she just more decided she wanted to move. And one of my additional passions, in addition to hunting, totally stemmed from my love of hunting and big game, but I also do a lot of wildlife photography. So I had my big camera, and I was watching her go up this sagebrush slope, away from this kill site. I mean, 2 little adorable cubs that she had, and this is some really tall sagebrush. And I think one thing that people sometimes forget about is, like, a sow grizzly is not always like that, actually that huge, right? Like, now she will mess you up any day of the week, but, like, it's like sometimes a young sow, even with a couple cubs, like, looks pretty small in the sagebrush, especially some of the big sagebrush. And so she's going up this hillside, and I'm looking through my camera at this point, and all of a sudden, and I didn't know it was up there, was a buck pronghorn stands up in the sagebrush, just up above her where she's going. And what I put together is he heard her but couldn't see over the sagebrush either. And so I actually have some funny photos where it's like, crap, this pronghorn, we've talked about how small pronghorn are, but particularly because of also the sagebrush and everything, and the compression of the photo, he actually looks bigger than the sow grizzly does. But they can't see each other over the sagebrush, but I can see both of them because they're on this hillside. Well, what does he do? Doesn't realize it's a grizzly bear, 20 yards from him, through this brush, and he starts walking right at her. And so I'm just watching this collision course of a curious pronghorn buck and a sow grizzly. The only thing that makes me nervous while I'm hiking in the dark, just going right at each other. And as soon as he started walking and she heard him, and then as soon as she realized like, oh shoot, this is something coming towards me, she was the one who panicked and fled out of there. And of course, it's like, sounds like, 100 elephants taking off, and he, got all freaked out and trotted back up and then got to a spot where he could look. But it was just funny because it was like, I'm watching two animals that can't see each other, but he had no idea what it was, but he was like, I'm just going to go check it out. And little did he know he was walking into a grizzly bear. But I love their curiosity. They're such a unique species. And just, every interaction I have with them, whether or not it's hunting or just general wildlife appreciation and being out in the outdoors, just, it's hard to not run into stories and situations where you just appreciate them even more.
Yeah, man, that's pretty cool. I love that. I love your take on that story opportunity. And I was actually going to ask, like, is everything else been rifle? I think so far. I was going to ask many of you guys have had the opportunity to snag one with a bow. It sounds like you have. So
You got one.
Yeah, I got a bow pronghorn in Nebraska. So it was when I was there. I think it's still this way. Maybe not. It is over the counter archery tags for pronghorn in Nebraska. Pretty cool opportunity. There's a reason. The reason is it's hard, and there's not that many of them.
Yeah.
So
You want to talk about the toughest I think bow hunt there is. I got my first. I drew the 900 tagger. It's not. I think it's pretty much everybody draws in Montana the 900 archery.
yeah.
You get to start early, which is fun. You have all season to do it. But dude, my first stock ever with a bow in my hand was the best stock I've ever put on an antelope, and it was like TV, dude. Like, it worked out. I didn't have a whole lot of cover, but I ended up working the only crease in this wheat field, and I ended up making this big, about a mile loop behind this buck. He was bedded by himself for some reason. The herd was over on this other piece of block management, and he was on a split piece of block management. But anyway, I end up 30 yards behind this buck, and all I can see is his horns through the grass. And I've got one of those like decoys you mount to your bow. And I don't know if it was like good or bad, but I was like, can't hurt, right? And so I'm like, I can't get him to stand up. And I stood up, and I couldn't see enough of his back to try to, feel comfortable putting an arrow down there. I sit back down, and I did this, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes. And he finally stands up. I didn't realize he stood up. I'm sitting there dinking with something else, and I'm trying to get a good range on him. And I put my rangefinder down. I look up, and he's just like curious. He stood there, and he'd actually walked about 5 yards closer to me, trying to figure out what I was. And about the time I got my release hooked up, he was like, I'm out of here. And he went up, linked up with the herd, and he took the herd over the next hill, and they were gone.
Yeah, see it.
Yeah, it's so great. And then I've had them too, where you get that decoy, and they'll come running a half mile at you just to come check you out. But trying to, it's one thing to sit in a tree stand and range something and arrange a tree around you or whatever. But antelope hunting with a bow, unless you're like ground blind hunting, if you're moving, dude, it's like the hardest thing for all those little pieces to come together, and it's just got to be perfect. And it's a game of probably 50 stocks. Like, it's nuts.
Yep.
That's awesome.
For
and
sure.
Even with a rifle, it's not easy, but bow is like, good luck. Have fun. You're going to have a blast doing it, but it's tough. It is tough.
Yeah.
And even like we've been talking about their physiology and whatnot, but we haven't really mentioned their incredible eyesight. Their vision is so powerful. So you're forced to belly crawl, and then usually if you try to stand up in any little capacity to get over the sagebrush, they spot you and they're vamonos, they're out of here. So that can be tough too, because you wouldn't think you need to get much of a rise to get that shot, but even those 2 feet, the 2 feet to get on your bipod or whatever is enough that the darn things and their 9 or whatever power vision, they can see so well that even the rifle has its own inherent challenges, let alone the bow.
Well,
that eyesight is unbelievable.
Well, and even the eye placement on the sides of the head, like if you look at a pronghorn, like a Euro-mounted pronghorn versus a Euro-mounted deer, if you think about it, or if you look at it, like compare them side to side, you're like, oh my gosh, look at those, the orbital space there is just so much larger and placed outward, and so they have such a wide range of vision. It's really cool. I'm looking over Josh's shoulder right now, thinking about that, because you can do that comparison right now behind you, and they have impressive vision, that's for sure. They're hard to sneak up on.
They are, and they, I think you mentioned it, Josh. Like, the longer you go into the season, if your best bet's opening day with antelope, but it's not even so much that they lose the curiosity or that they won't stand still for you or whatever. But what they seem to start doing, in my experience, is that like they develop a level of like, this is my line, and I'm not comfortable letting you get closer than that.
Yep.
It starts out at 50 yards, and then the next day it's 100, the next day it's 200, and they just keep a line on you, and and they can see so well. And in a lot of places they live, it's so flat. Like, good luck using cover in most cases, right? Like, you just, and I remember a bow hunt where I really first learned that was on an archery hunt, and I had a stock, and I actually rolled out of the truck. I had my wife keep driving. I like side rolled out of the passenger door, rear passenger door of the truck, so this buck wouldn't like peg me, I guess, and he would follow the truck. And I was gonna, like, he was eating or feeding at an angle straight away, and I was gonna cut him off like the football tackle, right, like across the field, and go meet up with him. And I got to about it was like 60, 65 or 70 yards, and I could not get closer. And we just kept, we just, he didn't care. Like, he didn't care I was there, I don't think, but he never once looked at me. But I think to your point, Brian, I think that side vision, he
Yeah.
had it, he knew exactly where I was,
Yep.
and he knew exactly how close I was through his peripheral. And he just, every time I tried to get a little closer, he'd just move a little bit more. And we just stayed at like 65 yards for almost a half mile. And I'm like, okay, this is done. I finally stood up and I just waved my wife. I'm like, hey, drive back here. Come pick me up. Like, I'm not going to get this buck.
Yeah.
And but it's nuts. And then with a rifle in my hand, I've totally seen it where you break that 200-yard line or whatever distance you're trying to get for your comfort factor, and they bump 50, 60 yards, and you do it again, and they just keep bumping it down the line. So it's pretty incredible.
One of the interesting things about them too, and my buddy killed one this way. They will, like, if they're unbothered and just moving, they do move throughout the day, and they don't necessarily do it at 40 miles an hour. So you can figure out which way a band's feeding. And if you're in a space where there's not, where it's not the pumpkin patch, as you called it, like, I think that's hilarious, by the way. If it isn't that scenario and they're just sort of moving on their own, you can, much like whitetail, or much like mule deer, you can get in front of them. If you can find a way to get out on the other side of a ridge or get down into a draw and get ahead of them, you can ambush them. And I watched my buddy kill one at 75 yards with a rifle. Like, it just walked out, like, he figured out where it was feeding to, and it came down a little draw, and he had set himself up perfect, and 75 yards away. So I have to say too, like, I've had a 310-yard shot, and I've had a I killed one at 60 yards with a bow. Don't, if you're listening to this and you've never hunted pronghorn, don't be discouraged. If you're not comfortable shooting at 400 yards, like, it's not, you can go out there and be perfectly successful. It's just going to take a little thought and a little time. So,
yeah, exactly. Just put a little, take the half second or whatever that time is to, like, just visualize that landscape. Like exactly like you said, you can position yourself or see what they're doing, or look at what might be bumping them around them, and then just kind of put a little game plan together. And they're semi-predictable in that respect. Like you said, you can kind of make it fit within your parameters of comfort from a shot distance or whatever that is. And yeah, I had one on that same unit. I don't know if it was the same group or not. It was probably the same herd. They all kind of hung out there. That first stock I ever put on that buck. The next season, I had I think I put in for the 900 tag again the second year. And anyway, I did the same thing. I was going to try to hunt a water hole. For whatever reason, every time I was at the water hole, they didn't show up. So then I decided to stock, and I knew that they were coming over one of those hills, and I did exactly what you said. I snuck down to where they couldn't see me, got there. I had my head set that I wanted a buck, but I still hadn't got an antelope yet, so I'm kind of kicking myself because it's any sex tag. And I had two does pop up at 40 yards, and they stood there, and I came to full draw on them because I was waiting for the buck to come. He never did, and I could have had a perfect broadside shot at an antelope and got my bow, opportunity. But I had my head set on a buck. I guess I'll let that one go. I still kick myself.
Got to be your hunt,
That's it. But it's a story, so that's good. But that was if you're an archery hunter, the only tip I'll give you is if you have a movable sight, which are awesome, get a multi-pin movable sight, because golly, dude, again, trying to put together the rangefinder and then moving a sight and whatever. I just, now if I go hunting out at all, it's like set it to 25 or 30 yards for your top, and your second one goes out to 50, so you can just
3-pin slider
difference if you need to.
3-pin slider is real good gouge.
100%. That's the number one archery tip I think I'd have, is get a 3-pin slider, man, because you need all the reference points you can get at a very quick moment's notice. So well, guys, man, this has been amazing. But awesome that you guys all three came on. I see why you guys wanted to do it. You guys all have totally unique perspectives on this stuff, and you all bring your own thing to the table, and it's been an incredible conversation. And I love what you guys are doing as far as the organization, and each one individually bringing something new to that table. And I really look forward to being a part of the Pronghorn Foundation and its legacy, and obviously its movement into the future. It just started in April. It's a few months old, and you guys are already putting the money where it needs to go, and doing the things that you guys need to do to get this thing rocking. So, and man, cool to be a community or part of a community with guys like you in it that are dedicated pronghorn hunters. I almost said it again. Got to watch that. But yeah, this has been cool, man. I've enjoyed it, and hopefully have you guys all on again. And Eric, like I said, man, we do our Operation Hunt series, so maybe we'll have you on as a dedicated Operation Hunt veteran, talk about your military service and maybe another antelope story or two. But
yeah, I'd love to.
But man, thank you guys so much for coming on, and thank you for what you're doing. And I'm so stoked that you guys started the North American Pronghorn Foundation, man. I'm excited to see the impact that it has.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, and thanks for magnifying the voice. It's important, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your service. This was great.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you for your service. Thanks for hosting us, allowing us to speak and talk at you and your listeners on your platform. And to all the listeners that are interested in conserving pronghorn, thanks for the effort you're putting in and for considering the North American Pronghorn Foundation.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And one more time, guys, where can they find you?
Yeah, so pronghorns.org, so pronghorns.org, or on social media there. Instagram, we're kind of old, so Instagram and Facebook, we're not on X or anything quite crazy yet, but NAPF_official will get you there on social media. So that's it. If you want to email us, info@pronghorns.org.
And feel free to email us on any topic, like Eric said earlier. Like it will be one of us that is the one fielding your message, and happy to get on a phone call, talk through things, and hear about pronghorn.
Heck yeah, man. And I'm not one of the guys on X either, but if you're one of those Gen Zs out there that just live on it, contact these guys and be the voice on X. You might be able to be the X board member. That's all you do. You just manage the X account.
There you go.
Maybe we'll have OnlyFans. Maybe not.
Oh boy.
North American OnlyFans. I love it. That's awesome. Oh, hey, speaking of that, you said you're the merch guy, Josh. Or you said merchandising guy, right?
I'm the guy who mails it out when the orders come through. Yep.
Okay. Well, hey, man, I got a shirt idea for you, and it came out of one of your stories. You said you belly crawl and pop it, and I think you could do an archery version and a rifle version, but I don't know. You could do something cool with that. I wrote it down. Belly crawl and pop it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, good stuff.
Yeah, man. Well, good. Thanks for coming on again, guys. Yeah, man, hope to have you guys on again sometime in the future. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
All right, guys. You too. We'll see you.
Take care.